Today's movie is a chilling found-footage horror film, The Bay. This is no ordinary horror flick. It's shot in a faux documentary style. The director uses a first-person perspective to pull the audience right into the middle of the unfolding nightmare. As the truth slowly unravels, the tension and fear steadily build. The film opens with a news report. On the coast of Chesapeake Bay in the town of Claridge, something strange is happening. Massive numbers of fish are washing up dead. Hundreds of lifeless fish float along the shoreline. But what's even more disturbing is the discovery of nearly 1,000 dead blackbirds, all found nearby. This environmental disaster has deeply affected the ecosystem. The sea is filled with rotting fish carcasses, and no one knows why. Scientists are still trying to figure out the cause. But one girl, Donna, knows the terrifying truth. She decides to speak out and reveal what really happened. It all began 3 years ago. That's when the fish first started dying. Slowly, quietly. Now, the problem has exploded into a full-blown crisis. With the situation growing increasingly dire, Donna can no longer stay silent. So, what really went down? Let's rewind 3 years and follow Donna back to when it all started. At the time, Donna was a young reporter assigned to cover Claridge's annual crab festival. The town was bustling with tourists. Sunshine, beaches, music, and smiles were everywhere. Donna was in charge of reporting on the festival's highlights. But just before the celebrations, a grim discovery shook the town. 2 marine biologists were found dead in the bay. Both were involved in research on ocean pollution levels. By the time they were discovered, it was already too late. At first, people assumed they were attacked by a shark, but something didn't add up. Their bodies were full of strange holes, as if something had eaten them from the inside. That's not how shark attacks look. Sharks tear their prey apart, often leaving little behind. These bodies were mostly intact, so the shark theory was quickly ruled out. But then, what did kill them? Some residents suspected the mayor was to blame, believing the deaths were caused by pollution from chicken waste dumped into the bay. It turns out, to boost local tourism, the mayor had launched a massive poultry business, raising tens of thousands of chickens for sale. All the chicken waste dumped straight into the water. The mayor defended himself, saying, "Yes, we did dump it, but it's not pollution." He claimed the town's desalination plant filtered the seawater into drinkable water, so the waste didn't pose a threat. All of the town's drinking and household water came from this plant. To prove it was safe, he even drank a glass of water on live TV. Seeing this, people stopped asking questions. The issue faded from public concern. But on the day of the crab festival, disaster struck. Something terrifying unfolded in the streets. Residents and tourists were seen bleeding, covered in boils and lesions. Children were affected too. Even at the crab-eating contest, people suddenly started throwing up. At first, it seemed like just one person, but soon, everyone who had eaten crab was vomiting uncontrollably. The town's hospital rushed to treat the patients, but it was a small facility, completely overwhelmed. The only attending physician, Dr. Jack, worked tirelessly, treating over 350 patients, with more coming in by the minute. All of them had the same symptoms: severe skin infections, vomiting, high fevers, and blisters. Jack had no idea what was going on. No cause, no cure, just panic. He contacted Director Williams at the CDC, reporting the outbreak. Williams promised to send instructions and help figure out a treatment plan. Meanwhile, 2 police officers, Paul and his partner Jimson, were on patrol around the town. They stumbled upon a corpse on the roadside. Paul approached to investigate and found the body eerily similar to the scientists', riddled with internal damage. Then a call came in. Someone reported a woman drenched in blood, screaming and coughing up blood on the street. By the time Paul arrived, it was too late. The woman was dead, horrifically mutilated, with her internal organs ripped out. Even her tongue had been cut out. Police suspected domestic violence at first, but the reality was far more disturbing. Elsewhere, Donna continued interviewing cheerful residents, unaware of the looming threat. At the same time, a young girl in town developed the same horrible blisters, but she hadn't even gone to the festival. She'd stayed home the entire time. How could she be infected? She tried calling her parents, but they had gone out an hour ago and hadn't returned. The scene shifts again, this time to footage recorded by the 2 scientists before their deaths. They had discovered an infected fish from the bay. Using a probe, they looked inside its mouth and found a swarm of parasites crawling inside. Even worse, the fish's tongue was completely gone. Tests revealed dangerously high levels of bacteria in the bay. The scientists had never seen anything like this, but they were certain these parasites were killing the fish, and possibly more. Back in Claridge, more people were dying. Each corpse told the same gruesome story. Abdominal cavities hollowed out, tongues missing. Dr. Jack came to a horrifying conclusion. This wasn't a virus. It was a parasitic organism. These creatures were entering the human body and consuming it from the inside out. The boils and rot were a result of internal feeding. If left unchecked, the parasites would devour their hosts completely. The town was spiraling into chaos. To calm the growing panic, the mayor made a radio announcement. He blamed the outbreak on climate change. Warming waters had triggered bacterial growth, he said. Nothing to fear, just a natural infection. He encouraged people to take precautions, wear masks, limit contact with the water. But tourists and locals continued playing in the bay, soaking up the crab festival fun. Some even went fishing near the contaminated area. One man proudly reeled in a fish, but as he showed it off, a massive bug crawled out of its mouth. It bit his arm and leapt into the sea. What was that thing? We return once more to the scientists' footage. They had hauled in a batch of dead fish, most of them severely damaged. When they cut one open, they found a fully grown parasite inside. The scientist immediately recognized it. It was an isopod, one of the oldest known species on Earth, dating all the way back to the Jurassic era. Isopods have razor-sharp mandibles capable of piercing flesh, tearing tissue, and removing internal organs. Next, the scientists inserted an endoscopic camera into the fish's mouth. What they saw was shocking. A giant mutated parasite appeared right before their eyes. It had bitten off the fish's tongue and latched itself onto the stub. The scientists immediately realized something was terribly wrong. This species of giant isopod had never been seen before. They believed it had mutated into something new, something dangerous. How it mutated, no one could say for sure. Back in the hospital, chaos was unfolding. The building was overcrowded with patients, and the number of infected people kept rising. Anyone who had come into contact with seawater started developing painful boils and severe infections. Even worse, several patients had already died. Dr. Paul had no answers. His only option was to perform amputations to try and slow the infection. Each patient who died had something in common. Their tongues had been half-eaten. Paul reported the situation to the CDC. After analyzing the data, they concluded the bay was most likely contaminated. The possible causes? Algae blooms, agricultural runoff, and, yes, chicken waste. It could all be linked to underground river leakage. Originally, the town didn't rely on seawater for drinking, but everything changed when the mayor built a desalination plant, drawing water from beneath the bay, filtering it, and sending it straight to people's homes. But still, the CDC couldn't confirm the source. They initially suspected it was some kind of fungal outbreak. Meanwhile, a family of 3 was out boating in the bay, completely unaware of what was happening back in town. They were still enjoying the sunshine and serenity of the water. At the same time, Donna was reporting live from the scene. She announced that a mysterious bacteria had spread through Claridge, causing harm to countless residents. As she spoke, screams erupted in the background. You could feel the pain just by hearing it. Elsewhere, Paul received an emergency call. Someone had heard screaming from inside a nearby home. He and Jimson rushed to the address. When they arrived, Jimson got out first to investigate. He called out several times, but there was no response. Noticing the door was unlocked, he stepped inside. Moments later, 2 gunshots rang out. Realizing something had gone terribly wrong, Paul drew his weapon and ran into the house. What happened next wasn't shown clearly, but both officers encountered something horrific and did not survive. Meanwhile, the CDC analyzed footage retrieved from the late scientists. They reviewed research notes, photos, and recordings. When Director Williams saw the images of the parasites, it all clicked. This wasn't a fungal infection at all. It was a mutated isopod, a parasitic creature that had evolved due to pollution in the water. These isopods had grown to unnatural sizes, large enough to tear through the hull of a submarine. Williams asked the obvious question: if the creatures are that huge, how did no one notice them? And more importantly, how did they get through the town's filtration systems? After further investigation, they found the answer. Juvenile isopods are incredibly small, nearly invisible to the naked eye. They had been hiding in the town's drinking water. Once inside the human body, they fed on nutrients and grew rapidly. But what caused this mutation in the first place? Williams opened the final video recorded by the scientists before their deaths. After discovering the pollution, the 2 researchers had decided to dive into the water to search for answers. As soon as they entered the bay, they were swarmed by thousands of isopods. The ocean floor was completely covered in the mutated creatures. Suddenly, one of them broke through a diver's mask. In seconds, the parasites devoured both researchers from the inside out. Back in the hospital, Paul contacted Williams again via video call. He asked, "What should we do now?" "The hospital is out of control." Williams gave him a grim answer. "Abandon the patients. Leave with your staff while you still can." It was a cold decision, but one made out of desperation. Once the parasites had entered a host, there was no saving them. After ending the call, Williams made a breakthrough. His team had traced the origin of the mutation, the chicken waste dumped into the sea by the mayor. Tests showed the waste contained steroids, fed to the chickens to accelerate growth. These substances caused the chicks to grow 50 to 60 times faster, reaching full size in just over a month. Once that steroid-laced waste entered the bay, the isopods fed on it and evolved into monsters. Elsewhere, Donna passed by a restaurant and heard screams. Curious and concerned, she stepped inside. On the floor, a trail of blood. She looked up, and there it was, a corpse, suspended above her, blood dripping onto her face. She screamed and ran to wash herself off, but at the sink, another body. This one was hollowed out, violently torn open. Its mouth hung open, tongueless. Suddenly, the corpse's eyeball twitched. Donna and her cameramen bolted in terror. Meanwhile, the boating family had finally arrived in town, but something felt off. The once bustling crab festival was now eerily quiet. A few steps in, they spotted a dead body on the ground. Horrified, they fled, hoping to find help in town. But the streets were lined with corpses. It looked like a scene straight out of an apocalypse. They tried to call for help, but there was no signal. With no other choice, the family hid inside a restaurant they believed was safe. Elsewhere, the mayor, realizing his lies had been exposed, attempted to flee the town with the police chief. But along the way, a police cruiser blocked the road. Standing beside it was Jimson, wandering aimlessly. The chief got out to talk to him. Jimson murmured, "I can feel them eating me. Everyone's going to die here." The chief tried to calm him, but before he could say another word, Jimson shot him. It was clear Jimson had been infected. He had lost all hope, and with that, he turned the gun on himself. Back to the family, things were getting worse. The mother managed to contact a friend via internet call, asking for help. But then, the father began showing symptoms. A blister had formed on his neck. Unbeknownst to them, he had gone swimming in the bay during their boat ride. That must have been when the parasite entered his body. He screamed in pain, clutching his stomach, feeling something crawling inside him. He vomited violently, and suddenly, an isopod emerged from his neck. Unable to watch him suffer, the woman made a heartbreaking decision. She ended his pain with a knife. Meanwhile, after witnessing Jimson's suicide, the mayor completely lost his mind. He just wanted to escape, but fate had other plans. As he fled, a speeding vehicle slammed into him, and just like that, his reign of denial ended. Back at the hospital, Dr. Jack followed Williams's advice. He sent all staff home. Only he remained. Realizing the truth needed to be told, he turned on the camera and recorded a final message. He wanted the world to know what happened here. It wasn't a virus. It was a parasite. The boils, the rot, the internal destruction, it was all caused by isopods feeding on human flesh. They left behind only hollow shells. And now, Jack himself had begun showing symptoms. A boil had formed on his body. Elsewhere, the surviving mother walked the empty streets with her child in her arms. They eventually found shelter in a relatively safe building. At 5:30 a.m., hazmat crews finally arrived. They rescued the woman and her child. Donna and her cameramen were also found alive. Authorities launched a full quarantine of the town. All the footage you've seen? Donna stole it from the investigation. Afterward, the government made an offer to the survivors. They were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements to keep the truth hidden. And that is where the story ends.